Namaskar and very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Bharat Bodh Kendra, Habitat Library and Research Center, India Habitat Center, and Indian Council of Philosophical Research, I extend a warm welcome to all present to the discussion in the ISC ICPR Study Circle lecture series titled Rabindranath Tagore on the harmony of interrelationship in the universe. This is one of the many initiatives taken by Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director of the India Habitat Center, to create meaningful conversations around India's knowledge systems, culture, and heritage. Today, we are deeply honored to have with us our chief guest, Baldev Bhai Sharma ji, veteran journalist, educationist, and author. It's a privilege to welcome our distinguished speaker, Professor Bindu Puri from the Center for Philosophy, Jawaharlal Nehru University. We are honored by the presence of Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director, India Habitat Center, who is chairing today's session. We warmly welcome all our esteemed guests and sincerely thank them for joining us this evening. To begin today's session on a truly auspicious note, I request our esteemed dignitaries to come forward for the lighting of the lamp and then join us on the dais. Please welcome Baldev Bhai Sharma, Professor Bindu Puri, and Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh. Now I request Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director, India Habitat Center, to kindly present the mementos as a humble token of our deep gratitude and appreciation to our distinguished chief guest, Baldev Bhai Sharma ji. And esteemed speaker, Professor Bindu Puri. Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Anushka to come to the dais and request her to kindly take over the proceedings further. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I extend a warm welcome to this gathering on the occasion of the fourth lecture of the IHC ICPR Study Circle. It is my privilege to formally introduce the distinguished dignitaries who have graced this august occasion with their presence. We are honored to have with us the convener of the study circle, Professor K.G. Suresh, whose efforts have ensured the smooth organization and coherence of the series. So Professor Suresh is a distinguished journalist, academician, institution builder, and an influential voice in media education and public communication. He currently serves as the director of the India Habitat Center, New Delhi. Professor Suresh has been the recipient of numerous prestigious honors, including the Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Puraskar in the year 2020, awarded by the Kendriya Hindi Sansthan, Ministry of Education, for his outstanding contribution to the journalism. He has also received the PRSI Leadership Award in the year 2017 for excellence in public relations. We are honored to have him with us today. With great pleasure, I now invite Professor K.G. Suresh to welcome to the address.
Thank you so much, Anushka. Most respected chief guest of the day, Professor Baldev Bhai Sharma, veteran journalist who has also served as chairman of the National Book Trust, and also as Vice Chancellor of the Kushabau Thakre National University of Journalism and Communication, Raipur. He was also professor at the Central University of Himachal Pradesh. And Professor Bindu Puri, I would say that today, of course, we are welcoming her as our keynote speaker today, but she is also the person, I would say, the brain behind this entire ICPR, IHC study circle, the driving force. But for her, this great understanding between two institutions would not have been possible. And I'm grateful to her for taking it forward. And today she is going to talk about, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, perhaps the only person in the world who has written the national anthem of two countries. And I would also like to take this opportunity, because I don't want to come between you and the keynote speaker and the chief guest. Just for those who are joining us for the first time, I would like to draw their attention to this, some of the initiatives that Bharat Bodh Kendra has undertaken over the last few months since its establishment. Apart from a dedicated space in the Habitat Library and Research Center that you have, I'm sure some of you have already seen, the esteemed members have already seen, which is focused on Indian philosophy, culture, Indian traditions. We have also recently added another segment in our library, which is the Bhasha segment, which is dedicated to all Indian languages. I'm sure the kind of feedback that I'm getting from members, I must say that it has been received well by our esteemed members. And apart from that, we have started seminars, workshops for those who are interested in going a little deep into whether it is Indian philosophy or civilization or culture, folk arts. We had a workshop on Natya Shastra. We had Sanlap or discourse series trying to understand two important dance forms of the country. We had one on Odissi. Rila Hota, well-known Odissi dancer, was with us, and she explained the aesthetics and therapeutics of Odissi. We had Padma Shri Shobana Narayanji, who talked to us about Kathak and its various shades and nuances. As I said, that we are continuously trying to bring in more newer elements into this. Very soon we will be having a regular conversation series with the Indian Council of Historic Research, ICPR. And we are going to talk about important issues like this year we are celebrating 200 years of Indian journalism. From the time we started the Udant Martand in Calcutta, in 1825, to 150 subjects like 150 years of Vande Mataram and a lot of other subjects which we plan to have in the coming days. Friends, I must express my thanks to our team led by Geeta ji, Sangeeta, Anul Abedin, and all these colleagues from the Habitat Library and Research Center who have made it possible. And I'm grateful once again to ICPR, its member secretary, Professor Sachidanand Mishra, for enabling this series of workshops. And we have had some very important speakers in the past. And today also, we are going to speak about, an aspect of Gurudev which is so relevant today in a world which is sought to be fragmented. It is important that we talk about harmony, about the interdependence. We have always believed in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and how that resonates in Gurudev's literature, Gurudev's concept, his worldview. I was fortunate that just 2 weeks back, I was at Shantiniketan for an international conference, and I have had the opportunity to, of course, I had gone earlier also. Gurudev's entire concept of education, where you still have at Shantiniketan, open spaces where students sit under the tree and study something that we get to read only in books. That continues to happen at Shantiniketan. The concept of Gurukul system of education, which our ancestors had practiced for long, and somewhere down the line, we certainly missed out our connect with nature, our connect with the society at large, and we got into isolated classrooms. And I believe that it's important that some of these aspects are revived, and that is possible only when we are able to generate a countrywide discussion on these topics. And once again, thank you, Professor Bindu Puri, for making this happen. And thank you for all of you for your patronage, continued patronage of this series. We hope to bring more speakers on more philosophical and more civilizational issues to you in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the welcome address and your kind words. Now, we are equally fortunate to be joined by the co-convener of the study circle and speaker of today's session, Professor Bindu Puri, whose dedication and academic insight have been instrumental in bringing this initiative to fruition. Professor Puri is an eminent scholar of modern and contemporary Indian philosophy, as well as moral and political philosophy. Currently, she teaches at Center for Philosophy, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Puri has published over 60 research papers in edited volumes and leading philosophical and interdisciplinary journals. She has written 4 major monographs, the most recent being Rabindranath Tagore, Peace in an Enchanted World, Routledge 2025. She has also co-authored with Professor Mrinal Miri, Gandhi for the 21st Century, Religion, Morality, and Politics, 2023, and has edited 9 books. Notably, okay, so I warmly invite Professor Bindu Puri to address the gathering.
So this is a lecture series on the relationship between the human and the non-human world in Indian philosophy. And Professor K.G. Suresh has really led this, besides his kindness to me, it's him who has led this lecture series. And it becomes very fitting to speak here on Rabindranath Tagore, who spoke of divinity as the person who is in the heart of the all. This lecture is going to try and unpack his concept of the human being, the relationship between the human being and nature, the concept of divinity, and the relationship between nature and man and divinity, which he thought of as the religion of man, the truth of interrelationship in the universe. As Professor K.G. Suresh said, that Tagore's position on man in the universe has become very relevant today. Because of all the modern Indian philosophers, it was Tagore who recognized the significance of the age in which he lived. He said the races of man have come face to face, out of their geographical enclosures, as it were. He saw, somewhat like Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo did, that this had led to conflicts between people. But he thought that these were aberrations. They were not inevitable. It was because human nature, that is the dharma or the essential quality of being human, was going against itself. Now, what was this essential quality? Human beings had the essential quality of being able to come into relationships of friendship, love, and respect. And he thought that these relationships were not only between human beings, but also between human beings and nature. So, like the German philosopher Herder, he thought human beings are embedded in nature. And this made him somewhat critical of Enlightenment modernity with the overemphasis on reason. It relegated the natural world to something less than rational, and therefore just purely something of utility which man could use. For Tagore, nature is, the natural world is an expression of divinity, and much in the tradition of Indian philosophy, whether in Pali or Sanskrit, he thought that the self is more than a rational, ego-driven being. The self is someone whose original vocation is that of a music maker and a seeker of harmony. Tagore unpacked this idea of the human person as a seeker of harmony and the religion of man as the harmony of interrelationship in the universe in the Hibbert lectures that he gave in Oxford in 1930. And then in the lectures called Man, which he delivered at Andhra University when Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan was the Vice Chancellor. Now, this conception was as much inspired by the Upanishads as it was by the Baul singers of Bengal, and left us with a kind of lasting hope for the future of humanity. So in this lecture, I am going to speak first of Tagore's conception of man as the finite and infinite, and then of his concept of nature and the relationship between man and nature, then move on to speak about his concept of God, finally to come to the religion of man and end on a note of faith and resolve for humanity. So in the first section, man the music maker, both finite and infinite, in the religion of man, Tagore actually spoke of the Persian prophet, Zarathustra. And he said, Zarathustra and the Bhagavad Gita both spoke of the gospel of the fight. And Zarathustra said that the end of the fight is in the house of songs. And he said, I am a singer myself, and I am very much attracted by this metaphor. This metaphor, he thought, not only brought out the fact that human beings could reconcile notes, but also, by nature, they were able to put them into harmony and rhythm. Beautiful thought. Now, how can human beings given to strife and war be by nature harmonious? That's what we are going to think. For Tagore, the answer lay in the fact that human nature was not enclosed in finitude. Rather, human beings had also an infinite aspect. He very famously spoke of this concept of the surplus. He said, of all creatures on the planet, it is the human being who has that surplus, which is much more than what is needed for physical survival. And Tagore not only therefore rejected the idea that the human being is enclosed in finitude, self-centered, but also insisted that the human being is centered around a relationship with the all. What he meant by this is that in his or her very empirical finite being, the human being has the potential for moral perfection and for moving towards a shared divinity of, a kind of shared existence in divinity. And he draws a lot for this concept from the Ishopanishad, on which both Sri Aurobindo and Gandhi also commented. And he says, if you look at the Ishopanishad, it's divided truth into two aspects, finite and infinite, saying that you cannot erase either of these aspects. And I'm quoting Tagore here. When through the help of avidya, the science of the finite, our rational and moral life reaches its fulfillment, it is saved. And the infinite is not something empty, but in it, the finite finds its ultimate meaning. So in line with these insights, Tagore drew from the Baul music of Bengal and spoke of the man of the heart, where there is the divine enclosed within the temple of the body. And he quoted the Baul poet Gagan, saying that the human being has to trust in his or her own possibilities. Over and again, the Indian tradition asserts not only that God is for each of us, but also that God is in each of us. And humanity is a necessary factor in the perfection of the divine truth. So it is significant that Tagore held on to the thought, very beautifully expressed in the Baul music, that the finite body is of immense value. What is the value of this finite empirical body? Well, for one thing, he gives us two arguments. The first is that the finite body is of value by virtue of being an expression of the divinity or the divine creator. The second reason is that our finite empirical existence is of value as providing an opportunity for us to come to realize ourselves in relationships with other beings, nature, and really the world's soul. And he often spoke about the vowels and their secret philosophy, where they held that the individual body is the temple in whose inner shrine the divine appears before the soul. But what is the relationship? Is it a union which ends in uniformity or sameness? Tagore rejects that idea of the, perhaps we could say, coming from the Advaita. And he thinks that the unions of the individual soul with this infinite aspect within her is not in the nature of homogeneity or sameness, but rather it's an enhancement of human existence. So at one level you come into harmony, at another level you retain your uniqueness. And that's very important to Tagore. So what does this imply? It's very important thought, because it implies that human beings have to live a moral life which is centered around this respect for uniqueness. And since the man in the heart or the person in the heart is located in these very many empirical bodies, individual spiritual life should aim at harmony and rhythm rather than uniformity and sameness. Now, how is it possible to arrive at this kind of harmony while living in the empirical world? Remember that Hobbes had said that human beings are essentially self-directed and egoistic. But like I told you a few minutes ago, Tagore doesn't agree with that. He thinks there's a surplus, and therefore we are constitutively generous. It is in the surplus that our creativity, that our music, that our religion abides. And Tagore thought that whenever we went to another land, we could recognize the creations as coming from that creative surplus. And we could also, appropriate those creations as being guests of the other culture. So he was clear that it was the abundance within human nature which helped us to find that kinship with other cultures. And, when he was in China, he said, these hills speak the same language as my own back in India. The wholeness of existence and our place in the infinite. This is really the aspect of infinity. The soul's enhancement is possible in this very empirical existence, and such an enhancement is the path to truth. Why? Because truth is really this unity of interrelationship. It's also the path to freedom. Why? Because in moving towards this enhancement, we become free of the confines of this egoistic finite life. Interestingly, it's very unlike, for instance, Kant, who thought this movement towards moral life is an imperative, and therefore it's imposing on us. Here, it's a movement to joy. The place vacated by our egoistic self, Tagore said, is filled with joy, with happiness. He declared that this kind of movement, using actually Kant's language, is going to happen in the natural world, amidst the trees, and he uses the word starry heavens. In yet another philosophical departure, this time from the Indian tradition as it was done in Sanskrit and in Pali, he says, what is the kind of action by which we are going to make this move to get into the infinite within us, to enhance our existence? Well, it's not going to be sannyas, because the self can only free itself from itself by its activity. And so, taking a cue from the Gita, which really inspired him, he told us a lot of what kind of action it's going to be, which is going to lead to such enhancement. And he told us, for one, that this movement is very joyous. But let me come to the three aspects, the practical suggestions. You can do action which is non-egoistic. For egoistic action is really embedded in untruth, because the egoistic man acts as if her or his interests are different from that of the universe, which we see playing out in the war right now. The second kind of insight about the nature of action, which will help us to move towards infinitude here in the empirical body, the temple of the body, like the bowels would say, is action involved, in the nishkam karma. Why the nishkam karma? Because he said purposes tend to narrow the self. So you have to look for purposeless in action, and that will take you towards abundance in your own soul. The third insight was that you would take the greatest joy in this moral action. It would never be devoid of pleasure and happiness. You are spontaneously happy. Now you may ask, how can we be spontaneously happy when sorrow plagues our condition? Well, Tagore said that, joy and sorrow are contradictory only when we don't see them in the light of the absolute. When you see them in the light of the absolute, they lose this absoluteness. So that's really how Tagore thought of the human person. Now, what did he think about the relationship between the human person and the natural world? Following the insights of the Baul singers, he spoke of a divinity which is not only within the human being but also in nature. Nature is not a personality like man or the divine in Tagore, yet it is a living presence which every individual can form an intimate and personal relationship with. Nature is also quite literally a place crammed with its king, that is with the divine. And this thought, comes across in Tagore very powerfully. And I'm going to play one song here, Aji Bashanto Jagrato Dware. I'm not really a Bengali speaker. I've learned whatever Bengali I know from my father, who's from Assam, which is very poor Bengali. So he's going to play it.
আজি বসন্ত জাগ্রত দ্বারে বসন্ত জাগ্রত দ্বারে তব অবগুণ্ঠিত কুণ্ঠিত জীবনে করোনা বিড়ম্বিত তারে
That's okay, Vijay. You can shut it. So basically he's saying, today spring is at the door, lively awake. Let your shrouded, diffident life open up. Let your heart's petals open up to this nature. In The King of the Dark Chamber also, it's very beautiful. You find the citizens lamenting, we can't see the king anywhere. So Tagore speaking through the character Dada, says that everywhere is the king. The whole of nature is full of the king. And as the citizens come to realize this, they sing. And that's another song which he's going to play for you, that we are all kings in the kingdom of our king. If it was not so, how could we hope to meet him in our hearts? So Vijay, you can play this song.
আমরা সবাই রাজা আমাদের এই রাজার রাজত্বে নইলে মোদের রাজার সনে মিলব কি সত্যে আমরা সবাই রাজা
That's good. So this is a beautiful song. We don't really feel like we are kings in the kingdom of the kings right now. But Tagore believed that divinity is, the natural world is the place, like the mediator between the human and the divine. And so what is nature then? Nature has a mutual relationship with man, intimate relationship. They exist in harmonious mutuality. Nature gives a shelter. Nature gives comprehensiveness of sympathy to man. He says, when I was early on a child, I used to run to the corner of my estate to look at the coconut trees, and I formed a true companionship with them. And later on, as he grew older, this sense also deepened. He said, the earth does not merely hold our body, it gladdens our heart. He writes of when he was sad, and then, he would go up to the roof of his house in Shantiniketan and gaze at the sal trees, and the peace of the sky filled his heart. And gradually, he began to see the world through the eyes of his soul. So then he said, look, it's not only me who sees it this way. This is how the Indian tradition has looked at nature. So he refers to Meghdut. And he says, when the yaksha is in grief, he's not shut up in his soul. The very agony of his separation from the loved one permeates the forests and the rivers and the sky. And in the Ramayana, the love of Ram and Sita fills the earth, water and sky with its exuberance. Another aspect of nature, nature repays its debt to the divine by sharing its abundance with man. And there is this beautiful play, Autumn Festival, Sharad Utsav, written in 1908, where Tagore picks up this theme. He writes, that the Betasani River is what it is, because it's ever giving back. This is why the world is beautiful. Human beings are invited by nature to take part in its festivals and run out and enjoy the rain. And nature also intimates human beings that they also have to take part in this rhythm of repayment of the debt. And one way we repay it is we give up our sluggishness, we give up our life of need and preoccupation, and we run out at nature's invitation to take part in nature's holidays, responding to the invitation. But that's not enough. We also need to repay our debt to the Creator by the responsibility of service and by not destroying nature. So now we don't think of the war in that terms, in terms of how it's destroying nature. More than service, there is more repayment. We need to respect nature as autonomous of human need and greed. This comes out in the play Rakta Karabi, Muktadhara. So in Muktadhara, he says, look, nature cannot be a co-conspirator with human beings in political or economic needs of a nation. And in Red Oleanders, Rakta Karabi, there is this Yaksha town, mining town. And in mining the earth for gold, we lose the gold of the sky. And what happens? What happens is not only that the earth is destroyed, but also human beings are dwarfed. They become like little bonsai. So Nandini, the heroine, dies. You know, her wristlets of red oleanders is mixed up with the dust. And this is due to the inescapable responsibility of humanity, of saving the earth from the developing kind of organizing power which seeks mastery over nature's resources. And very interestingly, Tagore says, Indian civilization has always been growing in this kind of intimacy with nature. And if you see the literatures of the Indian civilization, the place of nature is very different in Shakuntala or Kumar Sambhav or Vaishnav poetry than it is in Shakespeare. There's no scene of the barren heath in Vaishnav poetry. So this heritage has influenced India so that you grow up along with nature quite comfortably. And also, nature imparts a beautiful lesson that you do not have to look at all relationships as purely utility or expediency. And Tagore writes, my heart goes out to the man who receives the water on his body, not as something to use, but in reverence, as something sacred. This sensitiveness of soul is actually India's lesson for humanity, that of forging relationships without purposefulness. The message of our ancient forest is this, that these purposes divide us from man to man. Therefore, the message of an all-comprehensive union of souls, which rises above all differences, is the message of India's forests to the future of humanity. Now, taking off, what is his concept of divinity? Well, he refers to the Upanishads, that divinity, God, is peace, but this is not a passive peace. It is the start of movement which is creative, and in the end, it is the perfect correlation of all activities. That is divinity. Another aspect of Tagore's argument concerns, the place, the influences. He says the influences on my concept of God are, of course, the Vedic ancestors and the tropical sky with the suggestion of the uttermost beyond, and the Baul music, the folk music. So he's very clear that this is not the Advaitin idea of a non-differentiated Brahman, because he says the human world has a human God. So the idea of personality is always there. God is the eternal man, the universal man, the man of the heart, the supreme father and mother, full of qualities. Sarvendriya guna bhasanam. To my mind, Tagore's suggestion that God is a personality is very, very important, because it shows us that we can get to have a relationship with God outside of religions. Hence, very obviously, religions do not need to divide us. We can conceive that others can relate to God in a similar manner. And there is also a very beautiful idea that our relationship with God is full of mutuality. He says, otherwise it would be so humiliating for man if there was not this mutuality. He says, my longing is to meet you in the play of love, but this longing is not only mine, it is also yours. You also delight in my love, God. So God is not aloof in his glory. Where can I find God now? The question comes. Tagore reiterates the point made by the Baul singers that if we try to find God only by the senses, we shall quite miss him. And if we try to look for God only in the peaks of theology, again we will not find, because God appears within the soul, sometimes as the foreigner, sometimes as the unknown bird. And I'll play a song for you from the Baul music later. He's clear that, in the King of the Dark Chamber, it's very beautiful. The Queen Sudarshan is trying to find the king in the pleasure garden. But then in the dark chamber, the king tells the queen, that which is matched with me lies in yourself. And the idea is that once you have intuited God in the dark chamber, you will step out and find the divine everywhere. And this will bring not power, but it will bring joy. So now we move to the religion of man, having seen all these different aspects. Like I said, he explained this in the Hibbert lectures, and I always go to Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, who was present in the lectures. And he said, though many did not understand him, all were impressed by the magic of his poetry and the music of his voice. His aged face was worn deep with lines of thought and struggle, but on his rapt countenance seemed to glow the radiance of an unrisen day. That's Radhakrishnan on Tagore. To start at the beginning, where did he get this religion of man? He said, look, it's not from any high philosophy, it's from my own experience as a poet. And of course, my Vedic ancestors who gave me this idea of the sky. And the Bauls again, he was very familiar with their music. He had written a foreword to a collection. He put Lalon's song, Lalon Baul's song. Now again, my pronunciation is very bad. Khachar Bhitor Ochin Pakhi. And this is a beautiful song. And Mosmi, you have to excuse my pronunciation, really. And so I'll ask Vijay to play this song, because this is a very beautiful music. That's good. So, what is common to this Vedic religion and to these Baul songs? Tagore said it is the truth of relationship, the truth of harmony in the universe. That's what's common. Why do existent religions quite miss this? That's because they become sectarian, and sectarianism is like egoism. It quite misses the point. So he says, of course, all religions come close to this when they touch the Brahma in man. Somewhat close to Sri Aurobindo, Tagore also spoke of evolution. And he said, first evolution followed this multiplication of the external and then moved to man and to the inner life of man and to moral life and the possibility of perfection, emphasizing the ethical and the moral. In the inner realm, all human beings would find the abundance of the garden of their imaginings. And so, what is this abundance? It is the thread of unity touching all men and all times. And like I said, all religions come close to Tagore's religion of man when they touch the Brahma in man. And this religion rests on this turn inwards. In one of the lectures in Man, he titled it, I Am He, trying to gesture towards this mysterious truth of interrelatedness. This can only happen when the individual breaks through the shell of the ego. And again, here there is another very beautiful song, which is Ai Re Ai Pagol, Bhool Bhi Ja Apna Ke. That means you forget yourself. I think, Vijay, you can play one line, just one line. Sorry.
হায় আয় রে পাগল ভুলবি রে চল আপনাকে তোর একটুখানি আপনাকে আয় আয় রে পাগল ভুলবি রে চল আপনাকে তোর একটুখানি আপনাকে
So, how do you realize this great harmony in action? I mean, it's quite unbelievable seeing the state of the world. Tagore thought you could do that if only you extend the home towards the world. And that's the novel also, Home and the World. And the path is what we call sadhana. And this is really refraining from evil conduct. Goodness involves what? Coming into harmony with nature, coming into harmony with other beings. Being music makers. Music and not noise involves realizing this kind of rhythm in our relationships. Falling into rhythm also with our own joys and sorrows. That's very, very important. So Tagore said, one time he wrote in The Religion of Man that I was standing at my window in the zamindari and I saw some boys pulling a boat on dry land and suddenly the rain came. And when I looked at the rain falling on the dry earth, I looked back on the long burning track my sorrows had left on my life. And at that moment I realized I'm in a creative comradeship with the Creator. I got to be in harmony with all those sorrows and joys. And he said, I felt I had found my religion at last, the religion of man, in which the infinite became defined in humanity and came close to me to need my love and cooperation. So that's Tagore. And the concluding life in an enchanted world, Tagore's message to humanity. So Tagore asked, what should human beings think about? First they have to ask, where is the great man, the harvester of dreams, the music maker? Where is he? And all races have to ask themselves this question, what should I give humanity in return for the privilege to exist? What do I owe humanity? And he answered that is really, you have to give harmony back rather than sameness. What you have to offer is not an exaggeration of sameness, but while keeping to our own personalities, we have to find some way of coming into harmony. This can happen only when we approach each other with no purposelessness, as men with no ulterior purpose. Then all the misunderstandings in the human world, Tagore said, will go. The realization of such a religion will lead to peace, and I'm going to reiterate the prayer that Tagore wrote. May all beings be happy. May they have no enemies. May they be indestructible. May they spend their time in joyousness. May all living beings be free from suffering and not be denied their dues. Let us pray. Let sorrow come if it has to come. Let there be death, but let man declare across all space and time, I am he. So that's great. That's what he thought. You may now think that you can do nothing and we can do nothing and it's, all collective responsibility. But Tagore said, was not going to let us off like that. He said, all the responsibility lies with you. And therefore the famous song, Walk the Path Alone, Ekla Cholo, and that I'll ask him to play once so that you can, kind of see what kind of resolve is required. So Vijay, can you play this last song?
যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে তবে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো রে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে
So with that I come to the end of this talk and I leave you with Tagore and the thought of the harmony of interrelationship in the universe and your own resolve and responsibility. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an informative, interesting, and melodious lecture, I would say. Now, with great honor, I introduce the chief guest of this session, Professor Baldev Bhai Sharma, Professor Sharma is a renowned Indian journalist, writer, and thinker. He has served as the Vice Chancellor of Kushabau Thakre Journalism University in Raipur, Chhattisgarh, and earlier as the President of National Book Trust India. He has had a long and distinguished career in journalism, having served as the editor of leading newspapers such as Panchjanya, Dainik Bhaskar, Amar Ujala, National Dunia, and Dainik Swadesh. With more than 4 decades of active journalistic experience, he has published over 500 research-oriented articles on education, culture, nationalism, and socio-political issues in several major newspapers and periodicals. He has delivered more than 250 lectures at universities and academic institutions across the country. He has published many books, including Mere Samay Ka Bharat, Samachar aur Vichar, Sugandhit Jeevan, and Bharat Sanskritik Chetna Ka Adhishthan. A book based on his life and journalistic journey titled Manush Janam Anmol has become very popular. Professor Sharma has been honored with several prestigious awards, including Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi Award conferred by the President of India, the Madan Mohan Malviya National Journalism Award from the Government of Madhya Pradesh, the Sahitya Bhushan Award from the Uttar Pradesh Hindi Sansthan, and the Madhav Rao Sapre National Journalism Award from Chhattisgarh, among others. He is widely recognized and respected as a scholar of culture, education, and Indian nationalism. It is a great honor to welcome Professor Baldev Bhai Sharma. I now invite sir to address the gathering.
नमस्कार मित्रों, मंच पर आसीन आदरणीय प्रोफेसर के.जी. सुरेश, आदरणीय बिंदु जी और सभी प्रबुद्धजन, मैं बहुत स्थानों पर जाता हूँ, लेकिन आज का ये अनुभव मेरे लिए सचमुच बहुत विरल है, जहाँ बड़े शांत मन से चिंतन परक मुद्रा में और किसी विषय को पूरे विमर्श के साथ बड़ी आनंदपूर्ण भूमिका में, ऐसा नहीं बोर हो रहे हैं, उठ के जा रहे हैं, सचमुच मेरे लिए बहुत दुर्लभ अवसर है ये। और इसका श्रेय मैं आदरणीय सुरेश जी को देना चाहूँगा कि विवेकशीलता को किस तरह वो भारत बोध श्रृंखला के माध्यम से हम सबके अंतःकरण में आरोपित कर रहे हैं। और सबसे खुशी की बात यह है कि यहाँ बड़ी संख्या में नौजवान बैठे हुए हैं और बड़े मनोयोग से सारे कार्यक्रम में उनका सहभाग है। और जो आज कहा जाता है कि नौजवानों को किसी से कुछ लेना देना नहीं, वो अपने में मस्त रहते हैं, आप यहाँ देखिए, एक ऐसे विषय पर जो बड़ा गहन है और वो पूरे एकाग्रता के साथ उसमें सहभागी हैं। सुरेश जी ने, जैसा उन्होंने शुरू में बताया, भारत बोध श्रृंखला शुरू की है और इसके माध्यम से भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा का एक व्यापक वितान उन्होंने खड़ा किया है। और वास्तव में ये भारत बोध श्रृंखला मुझे लग रहा है कि भारत को जानने का बहुत बड़ा अवसर बन गई है, जिसके प्रतीक रूप में आज बिंदु जी का इतना सारगर्भित व्याख्यान रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर के दर्शन पर हुआ। उन्होंने कितना सरलता से, सहजता से और बीच बीच में गीतों का पुट देकर उसे प्रस्तुत किया, कितना जानकारी परक, कितना ज्ञानवर्धक। ये सचमुच हमको बहुत समृद्ध करता है। आज तो मित्रों जिंदगी 2 मिनट नूडल्स बन गई है। बस 2 मिनट में सब किस्सा खत्म। टीवी पर एक विज्ञापन आता है नूडल्स का, उसकी टैगलाइन है रिश्तों को चाहिए बस 2 मिनट। 2 मिनट में रिश्ते बन जाते हैं, हैं? रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने पूरी जिंदगी मनुष्यता के शास्त्र को दर्शन के रूप में प्रतिबिंबित करने के लिए लगा दी, और हम 2 मिनट में रिश्ते बना रहे हैं। ये बाजार की चालाकी है। तो उस बाजार की चालाकी को समझकर जीवन की दिशा को सही बनाए रखना है, तो इस प्रकार के कार्यक्रम जो हमारी दृष्टि को बड़ा व्यापक बनाते हैं, ये बहुत आवश्यक है। एक शायर ने बड़ी सुंदर, आज के मुख्य विषय पर तो आदरणीय बिंदु जी ने बहुत विस्तार से बात कह दी है, मैं उसके थोड़े से, जैसे टॉपिंग होती है ना, हमने सब कुछ बहुत बढ़िया बना के रख दिया, पर उसकी सजावट करना बहुत ज़रूरी होता है। तो मैं ऐसे ही कुछ बातें आपके सामने रख रहा हूँ। जैसे सौरो और जॉय की बात रविन्द्रनाथ के दर्शन में आपने कही, अगर मैं उसे सरल भाषा में, मैं तो मथुरा जिले के गांव में पैदा हुआ, तो बहुत बुद्धिमान किस्म का आदमी नहीं हूँ मैं। ठीक है, थोड़ा पढ़ लिख गया और सुरेश जी जैसे मित्रों के सानिध्य में थोड़ा बहुत कुछ बन गया, लेकिन मैं सामान्य किसान परिवार का व्यक्ति हूँ। तो जो मेरी समझ में आता है, सुख और दुख क्या है। आज के दौर में पाना ये सुख है और खोना ये दुख है। लेकिन आप देखिए, रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने जिस भारतीय दर्शन को रेखांकित किया, समृद्ध किया, सारी दुनिया ने गीतांजलि के स्वरों के रूप में उसका साक्षात्कार किया। वो जो दर्शन है वो भारत की आत्मा का प्रकटीकरण है। वो केवल बौद्धिक नहीं है, इंटेलेक्चुअल नहीं है। वो दर्शन भारत की आत्मा का प्रकटीकरण है, जिसे हमारे ऋषियों ने रचा। ऋग्वेद में हमारे ऋषि कहते हैं, भद्रम इच्छन्ति ऋषयः स्वर्विद तपोदीक्षाम उपनिषेद दुराग्रे ततो राष्ट्रम बलम ओजस जायते। ये जो जीवन है ये लोक कल्याण के लिए है, अपने स्वार्थों की पूर्ति के लिए नहीं है, लोक कल्याण के लिए है। और उसी को ऋषि कहा गया है। ऋषि का अर्थ एक विशेष आकार प्रकार का व्यक्ति नहीं होता। ऋषि एक प्रवृत्ति है, एक मेंटेलिटी है, जो भद्रम इच्छन्ति ऋषयः, लोक कल्याण के लिए जीता है, कर्म करता है। यही भारतीय दर्शन प्रकृति, मनुष्य और ईश्वर, इनके अंतर संबंधों को गूंथने वाला दर्शन, ये रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर के पूरे साहित्य में दिखता है। ये जो अंतर संबंध हैं, ये जिस दिन बिखरना शुरू हो जाते हैं तो मनुष्यता का क्षरण होता है। मनुष्यता नहीं बचती। फिर मनुष्यता नहीं बचेगी तो ये धरती नहीं बचेगी, प्रकृति नहीं बचेगी, और थोड़ा और आगे कहें तो ईश्वर भी नहीं बचेगा। बचपन में एक गीत गाया करते थे हम लोग, शुद्ध सात्विक प्रेम अपने कार्य का आधार है। प्रेम जो केवल समर्पण भाव को ही जानता है और उसमें ही स्वयं की धन्यता बस मानता है, शुद्ध ऐसे प्रेम में ईश्वर स्वयं साकार है। ये जो अंतर संबंध गढ़ा रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने, उसका सूत्र है प्रेम। प्रेम के बिना जीवन का कोई अर्थ नहीं है। आज आप देख रहे हैं सारी विश्व की क्या हालत हो रही है। मनुष्यता को तहस नहस करने के जितने भी प्रकार हो सकते हैं, व्यक्ति अपने स्वार्थ के कारण उसमें लगा है। अर्नाल्ड टाइनबी बड़े प्रसिद्ध ब्रिटिश इतिहासकार हैं, शिक्षाविद हैं, समाज विज्ञानी हैं। उन्होंने एक पुस्तक लिखी, ए स्टडी ऑफ हिस्ट्री, और उसमें विश्व में जो औद्योगिक क्रांति आई, उससे जो समृद्धि आई, उसके कारण देशों के संसाधन बढ़े, लेकिन टाइनबी सबका बड़ा विस्तार से वर्णन करते हुए लिखते हैं कि उस सारी आर्थिक तरक्की के बीच दुनिया के देशों में जो स्वार्थ और टकराव का संघर्ष शुरू हुआ, पूरी दुनिया आज विनाश के मुहाने पर खड़ी है। ये बहुत पहले लिखा था उन्होंने, आज नहीं है। आज तो उसका विकराल रूप हम देख रहे हैं। और आगे टाइनबी लिखते हैं बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात, अभी बिंदु जी ने जो विस्तार से सारी बातें कहीं, उसका सूत्र है इसमें। टाइनबी लिखते हैं कि इस परमाणु युग में विनाश के कगार पर खड़ी हुई दुनिया को अगर कोई बचा सकता है, वो भारत का विचार है। वो भारत के परिवार की संकल्पना है। ये टाइनबी लिखते हैं, कोई भारत का आदमी नहीं लिख रहा है। ये जो भारत बोध है, भारत के उस विचार को सुदृढ़ करने की एक प्रक्रिया है, जिसे अभी 2-3 साल पहले दिल्ली में G20 का सम्मेलन हुआ। दुनिया भर के राष्ट्राध्यक्ष आए उसमें, जिनके नाम से धरती कांपती है, ऐसे लोग भी आए उसमें। और आज उनके उत्तराधिकारी धरती को खूब कपा रहे हैं। और उसका जो ध्येय वाक्य था, वसुधैव कुटुंबकम, ये जो जीवन दृष्टि है, ये रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने प्रकृति, मनुष्य और ईश्वर के अंतर संबंध का जो ताना बाना बुना अपने दर्शन के माध्यम से, उसी की अभिव्यक्ति है। जो मैंने पाना और खोना की बात अभी आपसे कही, उसका एक छोटा उदाहरण आपको देता हूँ। राम के जीवन को हम सब जानते हैं। अभी रामनवमी गई है। राम लंका से विजय प्राप्त करके लौट रहे हैं, और जो पुष्पक विमान है वो अयोध्या की तरफ जा रहा है। अयोध्या पास ही दिख रही है, लेकिन राम पुष्पक विमान को थोड़ा सा दूसरी दिशा में ले जाते हैं। लक्ष्मण चौंकते हैं कि भैया अयोध्या तो इधर है, आप यहाँ कहाँ जा रहे हो? वहाँ कितने लोग बड़ी आतुरता से प्रतीक्षा कर रहे हैं, राम आ रहे हैं, राम आ रहे हैं। तो मानो स्टीयरिंग घुमा दी हो। राम ने कहा कि नहीं, पहले हम नंदीग्राम चलेंगे, वहाँ भरत प्रतीक्षा कर रहा है और उसने मुझसे वचन लिया है कि 14 वर्ष के बाद एक पल का भी विलंब आपने किया तो मैं आत्मदाह कर लूँगा, इसलिए पहले वहाँ चलो। भरत नंदीग्राम में राम की खड़ाऊं लेकर अयोध्या का राज चला रहे हैं। राजगोपालाचारी ने, मैं इंटरमीडिएट में पढ़ता था तो एक सप्लीमेंट्री बुक अंग्रेजी की थी, पतली सी, भरत, राजगोपालाचारी ने लिखी है, और उसके नीचे उसका डिस्क्रिप्शन था, भरत द एम्बॉडीमेंट ऑफ धर्म। भरत धर्म का प्रतिरूप था, और ऐसे भरत के प्राण बचाने के लिए राम जाते हैं। तुलसीदास ने भी बालकांड में जो स्तुतियाँ की हैं उसमें लिखा है, वंदऊ प्रथम भरत के चरणा, जासु नैम व्रत जाय न बरना। ऐसा भरत। और राम पहुँचते हैं, भरत उनके चरणों में गिर पड़ते हैं और जो खड़ाऊं हैं वो लाकर दे देते हैं, भैया ये अपना राज संभालो। और जैसे ही भरत ये कहते हैं राज संभालो, राम रोने लगते हैं। मैथिली शरण गुप्त ने साकेत महाकाव्य में इसका जो वर्णन किया है मित्रों, वो भारतीय दर्शन का डेस्टिनेशन है। मैथिली शरण गुप्त लिखते हैं, जब राम को खड़ाऊं दी गई, सिंहासन सौंप दिया, राम रो पड़ते हैं, तो भरत आश्चर्यचकित होते हैं। वो कहते हैं, करे आप तो परम ब्रह्म हैं, दुख सुख से परे हैं, आपकी आंखों में आंसू। तो मैथिली शरण गुप्त ने जो 2 पंक्तियां लिखी हैं, वो सारे विश्व की मानवता को बचाने का एकमात्र सूत्र है। राम कहते हैं, खोकर रोए सभी, भरत मैं पाकर रोया। जो पाने और खोने का दुख और सुख है, उसका उल्टा है ये। लोग तो पाकर खुश होते हैं, राम राज्य पाकर दुखी हो रहे हैं, आंसू बहते हैं। खोकर रोए सभी, भरत मैं पाकर रोया। और फिर आगे राम कहते हैं, ये राज जो तुमने मुझे दे दिया, इससे मुझे खुश होना चाहिए, लेकिन मैं दुखी हूँ। क्यों? क्योंकि अब तुम्हारे जैसे धर्मनिष्ठ राजा से अयोध्या की प्रजा वंचित हो जाएगी। ये है जीवन का दर्शन। जैसे आर्ट ऑफ लिविंग आजकल बड़े बड़े कोर्स कराए जाते हैं, लेकिन ये आर्ट ऑफ लिविंग भारत की आत्मा में बसी हुई है। मैं छोटा सा था, मेरी दादी अनपढ़ कृषक परिवार की महिला थी, तो मैंने बचपन में उससे सुना है, फायदे के लिए नहीं, कायदे के लिए जियो। आज सब फायदे के लिए जी रहे हैं। मनुष्यता संकट में पड़ गई है, कायदे की किसी को परवाह नहीं है। कायदा माने जीवन का अनुशासन। जिस भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा की मित्रों हम बात कर रहे हैं, उस ज्ञान के बारे में श्री कृष्ण ने गीता में कहा है, नहि ज्ञानेन सदृशम पवित्रमिह विद्यते। ज्ञान के समान कुछ भी पवित्र नहीं है, ज्ञान ही सर्वाधिक पवित्र है। ज्ञान केवल बुद्धि में नहीं है, ज्ञान केवल किताबों में नहीं है, ज्ञान जीवन व्यवहार में है। और ज्ञान की 2 विशेषताएं हैं। एक, ज्ञान मन को निर्मल करता है, और दूसरा, ज्ञान जीवन का अनुशासन निर्माण करता है। ये जो भारत बोध है उसकी अभिव्यक्ति है। और रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने जो दर्शन हमको दिया, गीतांजलि के रूप में सारे विश्व ने जिसकी जय जयकार की, उन्होंने प्रकृति, अभी बहुत विस्तार से बिंदु जी ने सब बातें कही हैं। प्रकृति और शिक्षा, इसके दर्शन को कैसा जीवन व्यवहार में उतार कर दिखाया। बड़ी बिल्डिंगें, बड़े इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर। मेरा सौभाग्य है, मैं शांति निकेतन में गया हूँ 2-3 बार। जब एनबीटी का अध्यक्ष था तो वहाँ हमने कई कार्यक्रम किए हैं। आप देखिए वहाँ का वातावरण। शिक्षा इस तरह के संसाधनों की मोहताज नहीं है। प्रकृति की गोद में बिठाकर, आज भी वहाँ पेड़ों के नीचे चौहद्दी बनी हुई है, उस पर आचार्य बैठता है और जमीन पर विद्यार्थी बैठते हैं। ये जो जीवन दृष्टि है, ये मनुष्यता का विस्तार करती है। और जो दर्शन है वो हमको यही सिखाता है। दर्शन केवल फिलॉसफी या किताबें नहीं हैं, दर्शन तो जीवन है। इसको संवार लिया हमने तो दर्शन सफल है। और हम बड़े दार्शनिक बनकर भी समाज जीवन को नष्ट कर रहे हैं अपनी बुद्धि के चातुर्य से। तो फिर दर्शन का कोई मतलब नहीं है। रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर का जीवन कितना सादा, कितना सरल। ये जो सरलता है जीवन की, यही दर्शन की मुख्य चेतना है। और इसलिए मैं जो कह रहा था कि एक शायर ने बड़ी, बस अपनी बात समाप्त करूंगा, 2 पंक्तियों में बड़ी सुंदर बात कही है। ख्वाहिशों भरी जिंदगी में हम सिर्फ दौड़ रहे हैं, रफ्तार कुछ धीमी करो मेरे दोस्त, ताकि खुशी से जी सको और खूब जी सको। रफ्तार का पागलपन तारी है हमारे दिल और दिमाग में, और उसमें मनुष्यता कहीं खो रही है। इस मनुष्यता को बचाइए। हमारे राष्ट्रपति रहे अब्दुल कलाम, उन्होंने एक पुस्तक लिखी है इंडिया विजन 2020। उसमें बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण एक बात है। आप सब नौजवान हैं और यहाँ कुछ बड़े अनुभवी लोग बैठे हुए हैं, उन्होंने अपना पूरा जीवन अध्ययनशीलता में बिताया है। तो मैं नौजवानों से अनुरोध करना चाहूँगा कि पढ़ने की आदत विकसित करिए, पुस्तकें पढ़िए, अखबार पढ़िए, ज्ञान का संवर्धन करिए। तो पुस्तकों के माध्यम से हम जो कुछ सीखते हैं वो जीवन व्यवहार में आए। और कैसा आए? अंत में 2 पंक्तियां जयशंकर प्रसाद की कामायनी महाकाव्य में, बड़ा आप पढ़ेंगे, पढ़ने की आदतें डालेंगे तो जीवन आनंदित हो जाएगा। मनु का अवतरण होता है धरती पर। मनु को भारतीय शास्त्र परंपरा में जगत का पहला मनुष्य माना जाता है। लेकिन मनु जब नाव में आते हैं, चारों तरफ प्रलय काल है, पानी पानी, कहीं पैर रखने की जगह नहीं, कहाँ उतरूं, क्या करूं, कहाँ मुझे दैव ने यहाँ भेज दिया। दैव मनु की दुविधा समझ जाते हैं और फिर आकाशवाणी होती है। और कितना सुंदर 2 पंक्तियों में वर्णन। विश्व के सारे ज्ञान का निचोड़ हैं ये 2 पंक्तियां जो कामायनी में जयशंकर प्रसाद ने लिखी। औरों को हंसते देखो मनु, हंसो और सुख पाओ। आज हम सब अपने सुख के लिए हैं, दिल मांगे मोर, कम से काम नहीं चलता। लेकिन मनु को कहा गया, औरों को हंसते देखो मनु, हंसो और सुख पाओ, अपने सुख को विस्तृत कर लो, जग को सुखी बनाओ। मित्रों, ये जो दर्शन है ये जगत को, मनुष्यता को, प्राणी मात्र को, जड़ चेतन जल जीव नव सकल राममय जान तुलसीदास ने लिखा है। सबको सुखी बनाने के लिए दर्शन है, ये केवल बुद्धि से समझने के लिए इंटेलेक्चुअल एक्सरसाइज नहीं है, ये जीवन को संवारने का एक उपक्रम है। आप सब बड़े मनोयोग से यहाँ आनंद ले रहे हैं इसका, और मैं सचमुच बिंदु जी का आभारी हूँ, उन्होंने कितनी महत्वपूर्ण बातें हमें कहीं, और सुरेश जी का आभारी हूँ कि उन्होंने ऐसा अवसर हम सबको दिया। और एक दिन नहीं, ये निरंतर प्रक्रिया है, मासिक व्याख्यानमाला। आप सब आनंदित हों, सुखी रहें और जीवन के सार को पकड़ने का प्रयास करें। धन्यवाद।
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable knowledge and thoughts with us. With that, I request Professor K.G. Suresh to invite the questions.
Thank you so much. After that, what should I call? Brainstorming. And now the floor is open for questions. And we will start with Dr. Yogesh Gondal. Can we get the mics?
See, thank you, Professor Bindu Puri, for a very, very stimulating and comprehensive talk on Tagore. I have a small question for you. Now, as I was listening to you, I was reminded of, I'm a student of literature, incidentally. I was reminded of the English Romantic poets and Wordsworth's concept of nature, and especially one line from his poem, Lines Composed, the poem famously known as Tintern Abbey. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. And also Rousseau. Of course, Rousseau's concept and Tagore's are very different, but certainly of the English Romantic poets. I wanted to know whether and in what context Tagore ever referred to Wordsworth and the English Romantic poets. Because of course, the English Romantic poets were also very deeply influenced by the Hindu thought in many poems. Wordsworth, we see that in Wordsworth, we see that in Keats and Shelley as well. But has Tagore referred to it, and what is your view about it?
Thank you so much for that beautiful question. Actually, Tagore talks about this.
Mike, please.
Yeah.
I'm sure people at the back can't hear you.
Tagore talks about, just on this point, I think it's in the essay Forest Civilization, I think, where he talks about how Indian literature, even, is different even from the Romantic poets. He says, even though nature may have a place, but this kind of harmonious mutuality between man and nature is not quite there. He says you cannot get what you find, for instance, in the depiction of the hermitage in Shakuntala. That's Tagore's view. And as a matter of fact, he thinks the kind of depictions of nature in Shakespeare, of the barren heath and the witches and so on, they also depict the malignant forces as nature. And that, he says, is not the fault of anybody, but it's just the difference between civilizations and worldviews. And, I find it quite interesting how metaphysics actually relates with the rest of your life, including politics. So given that we have such a view of the world, the relationship between man and nature can also be like this. Like both are absolutely equal in the Indian worldview. And that is what you wouldn't find in the Romantic poets. That's Tagore's view, what he says. I can actually give you a reference later to that particular essay.
Wonderful, wonderful lecture, Binduji. Wonderful. It was so good. You can weave together the many aspects of this the cosmos, the theos, and the anthropos. I loved it. I like to place your notion of harmony of this interrelationship in the context of the fierce debate between Gandhi, Mahatma, and the poet on Bihar earthquake. On Bihar earthquake. In 1934, Gandhi sees the Bihar earthquake as the karmic effect of a practice of untouchability. And the poet says, no, it is not. The natural catastrophes are based on physical facts. So how do you reconcile these Gandhis, if I call it the religious view, the spiritual view, and what you could Tagore's the physical view, if I put it that way? Thank you.
This is really beautiful, and I've thought about it too. Because they exchanged letters in 1934, it was in the third phase of the debate between Gandhi and Tagore, when the Bihar earthquake became an issue. And Gandhi wrote that, this is a punishment for the divine, for the sin of untouchability. And of course, Tagore first wrote to him, did you really write this? Or are you being misquoted? As was the way between them. And Gandhiji always wrote to him, you haven't criticized this. Have you not seen it? So it was really quite beautiful, their friendship. And so Gandhiji said, I believe that there is this link between nature and man, that the sins of man, are paid by nature. And Tagore replied that you who's occupying the the place of a Mahatma, you should not encourage unreason in the minds of people. So why, at the same time he said, how can you think that nature is capable of such malefic intentions? That was the problem for Tagore. He did not quite agree that nature could have such intentions, because to him, nature was a living presence. It was the comprehensiveness of sympathy between man and nature that he saw. So he said, nature is not like man. It's not going to take these kinds of revenge. And the second thing about Tagore is this, great importance he puts on freedom to think. And that, he thinks Gandhi is compromising by putting this view forth. So these are the two reasons that they part company over there. And yet they remain the best of friends.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask, what is the way forward? That is to say, we indeed have taken a wrong turn somewhere, because we have become excessively sectarian, finite, egoistic, regularly affirming that my culture, my caste, my religion, my nation, and the greatness of it, are almost making a hegemonic homogenization, which Tagore was against, and not understanding the vigor that the differences play, the interplay of differences at different points and its acceptance. So what would be the way forward in a Tagorean philosophy for a race or humanity as a whole which has taken a wrong turn towards an excessively egocentric view of life?
That's a very nice question. Well, I'll say that do not confuse Tagore with any emphasis on uniformity. In his essay on the nation in the West, he wrote and spoke about it in America as well, that neither the vagueness of cosmopolitanism nor aggressive self-worship is the goal of human history. So he believed that you have to affirm your unique identity and yet bring that identity into harmony with every other kind of unique identity. And because we are music makers by nature, we can do it. So he says, look, to Gandhi he once said, I can bring divergent notes into harmony, but of your yarn, what a mess I'll make. So basically, as music makers, we have to produce harmony and tune, not noise. So why can we not accept that uniqueness can come into harmony with every other kind of uniqueness? Universal cosmopolitanism is not the answer, but bringing things together is the answer in a Tagorean perspective.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Bindu Puri, for that very structured, very enriching kind of a presentation. I mean, it has actually brought in Tagore. You have actually brought in the concept of creativity in surplus to the fore. This is just a query, something between Aurobindo and Tagore. Just like you just answered to that very pertinent question about how do we address the modern day polemics about egocentricness, and you said that don't look for uniformity. Just correct me if I'm wrong, that the slight difference, if I can say, or a nuanced difference between Aurobindo and Tagore would be that probably Aurobindo was looking at the uniformity and not Tagore.
Very
just correct me.
interesting question. Actually, he has a piece in The Ideal of Human Unity where he says unity and uniformity is not the same thing. Unity takes the easy route and imposes homogeneity, whereas, uniformity imposes homogeneity, but unity respects differences. So I wouldn't say that Sri Aurobindo is so different from Tagore. Actually, I find them coming together very beautifully. Both of them speak about evolution. But of course, remember that Sri Aurobindo also rejects this Mayavad, right? The idea that earth is eventually an illusion and everything will be, oneness in that sense. He wants, in Savitri, what is the last stanza? There await them the multi-voiced human world. So Sri Aurobindo is also quite clear that unity and uniformity is different. So if you see all the conflict in the world, it's because we are not able to see that unity and uniformity is different. But they are just looking at it differently because Tagore is the music maker and a singer. And so, he says, wherever I hear the Hall of Songs, I delight in the music.
Thank you so much. And just that they have been very engaged with aesthetics. It talks about engagement and yet sort of a detachment. I think that Nishkam kind of an engagement plays very well both in Tagore and Aurobindo.
I was looking at both their essays on the Gita recently. So, I was looking at Gandhi and Sri Aurobindo's essay on the Gita. And if you look, there are all these different uniquenesses. And I don't think it would bother either of them. They were quite happy with the multi-voiced human world.
Thank you so much for all those wonderful questions. That would be the last for the evening. Yeah, please. Okay.
Madam, you said that, what is your definition of sannyasi? Because you said you have to do activities to attain salvation. What is your definition of sannyasi? There are many sannyas, you can call sannyasini. They are doing activities, nishkam seva, they are doing, running, heading institutions, hospitals, education. And are they not doing activities? They are also sannyas. So what is your definition of sannyasi? Second question is, what is this slides? These two slides have any relevance with this discourse?
No, the slides are not relevant to the discourse. They are part of the decoration of the center. And indeed, we should be really happy to have this really beautiful space to talk about Tagore. I think that's the habitat is really quite a divine space. If you walk around the gardens over here and you see the beautiful flowers in bloom, you can really feel quite happy and comfortable with your space. So I think I just find the habitat the best place to talk about the relation between the human and non-human universe. But regards your question, I was not really giving a kind of a personal view, but that Tagore was really very familiar with the conflict in the Indian tradition, between the path of action and the path of knowledge, right? So he was saying that to arrive at the infinite within yourself, you don't need to reject the karma mark. So that's what he was speaking to. Of course, if you renounce the world and yet remain engaged with it without purposes, then you are actually speaking about the amalgamation of the two marks, right? So that's okay with Tagore. He's happy with it. But he's speaking to that whole discourse that Indians are not really engaged in the karma mark, that they think salvation and infinitude will only come by that mark. That's what he was speaking to. Thank you so much for the question, though.
Would you agree that it's very unfair to Tagore to compare him with Gandhi?
It's very
Unfair to compare Tagore with Gandhi, because Gandhi at the end of it was a politician par excellence, and Tagore was on a completely different plane.
Well, I must say that Tagore wrote something on Gandhi the man. And he said that, many of the things that he said, I had said before. But it's the beauty of him that he could translate them into action in a way that I never could. And this is, if you look at the debate between the two of them, it was Tagore who spoke about, the decentralization. It was Tagore who spoke about concentric circles making the nation. But like he said, I could never get them quite across in the way in which he could. So I don't think that I don't know where the unfairness would lie. Would it lie on the side of Tagore or on the side of Gandhi?
Well, certainly, they're on two different planes. Tagore was a visionary, Gandhi was a man of action, essentially. Behind all his philosophical treatises and all that he theorized, he was essentially a man of action, a man who brought India freedom through action and through mass mobilization. That was never Tagore's. Tagore was a spiritual leader, was a humanist, was lots of things at a totally different plane.
And yet he...
Although they were two good friends, but that is Gandhi's greatness, that he could gel with both a Nehru and a Patel. And again, they were two very different things.
No, but yet, see, Tagore is the man who established the first cooperative bank. Tagore is the man who established the Eastern University. Tagore is the man who set up schools. So we can't say he's not the man of action either. But I think that Gandhi had this wonderful ability to translate action without purposes into everyday concerns. And Tagore was very focused because he thought education is the path to peace. And therefore he set up Vishwa Bharati as the vessel of his life, as he said, best creation, and took it forward. So it's different kinds of action, and yet he had to say about him that he could do much more than I could, even though some of the ideas were mine.
Thank you so much. Friends, in an era when technology connects us instantaneously, yet often leaves us more alienated, like we see at homes today when we are connected to the whole world through our mobile phones, yet family members are not speaking to each other but connected through WhatsApp groups, family groups. And when the planet itself cries out for healing, Tagore reminds us that the path to peace, personal, social, and ecological, lies in rediscovering this primordial harmony of interrelationship. These are not mere poetic ideals, they are a practical philosophy for our times. I am grateful to Professor Bindu Puri for illuminating these depths with her characteristic insight and scholarship. Thank you, Professor Baldev Bhai Sharma. आपने जयशंकर प्रसाद, मैथिली शरण गुप्त, रामचरित मानस के माध्यम से आपने वो जो जिसको हम कहेंगे कि प्रासंगिकता, रविन्द्रनाथ ठाकुर के जो प्रासंगिकता है उसको हमारे समक्ष रखने का आपने बहुत सफलतापूर्वक रखा आपने, उसके लिए आपको हृदय से धन्यवाद. And thank you so much for this wonderful audience, for that very engaging session. We promise you more such sessions in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. As we approach the conclusion of today's program, a formal vote of thanks will be delivered by Sangeeta Gupta ma'am. Thank you all once again for being with us today.
Before we conclude, I have the honor to propose the vote of thanks. We express our heartfelt thanks to our distinguished chief guest, Baldev Bhai Sharma, for gracing this occasion with his presence and sharing his valuable insights. Your thoughts and experience have truly enriched today's discussion. आदरणीय, आपके शब्दों के लिए से हम अभिभूत हैं. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to our distinguished speaker, Professor Bindu Puri, ma'am, Center for Philosophy, Jawaharlal Nehru University, for her insightful and thought-provoking lecture. Also, a special thanks to ma'am for her all guidance for this lecture series as a co-convener. We extend our sincere thanks to Professor Dr. K.G. Suresh, Director, India Habitat Center, for his constant guidance, encouragement, and visionary leadership in making this initiative possible. We are thankful to Indian Council of Philosophical Research for its continued support and collaboration. We also thank Mr. Sandeep Tandon, CEO, Habitat World, and the Habitat Program Division for their support. We also acknowledge with gratitude Mr. Sandeep Kapoor, Deputy Director, ISC, the finance team, Amarnath sir, Geeta ma'am, and the HLRC team for their valuable efforts, as well as all staff, including the video and photography team and the technical and sound team. I thank all our distinguished guests, to our esteemed audience, scholars, members, and students for their presence. Your engagement makes these discussions meaningful and impactful. Once again, my sincere thanks to everyone, and we look forward to your continued support in our future initiatives. To conclude today's session, on an auspicious note, I would like to share a traditional shlok that conveys our heartfelt wishes for the well-being and happiness to all. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukh bhag bhavet. Thank you, dhanyavad.